college?
Yeah, I was working all during college. I worked at the same place for 7 years, but
Oh,
to help pay for my school. But they,
yeah.
I was given this opportunity to do full time in France for a year, so I quit that job. But
Yeah. So was I. Even I was working for the 3 years of
yeah,
college that I did
yeah.
most of the time.
Did you go to school full time or part time?
So it wasn't a school of sorts. It was, after school. For example, how does the school system work over there? Like over here, for example, when you begin with, your first class that you go to is called the nursery,
Mhm.
where they teach you basics of,
Yeah.
language and all of that. Then you go to kindergarten,
Yeah,
and then it's 1 to 12.
yeah,
First, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth,
yeah.
and so on till 12th. Then you go to college. How does the system work over there?
Pretty much exactly the same. Only we don't call it nursery; we call it preschool.
Yeah.
So you
All
have
right.
preschool, kindergarten. Then you have first through fifth grade is called elementary school. Then
Mhm.
sixth, seventh, eighth grade is called middle school, and then
Mhm.
ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th is called high school.
Okay. And after high school, you go to college.
Yeah, you go to college or you go to trade school. So you go to
They're very good learn skills, like trade skills.
yeah, like being an electrician or something like that. So
Yeah.
normally you go to college for 4 years to get a bachelor's
Mhm.
degree, but I have only been going part time, so I've only been taking a couple
Mhm.
classes at a time because college is
Mhm.
very expensive back home. So
Right.
I've been going part time for 6 years now, or almost 7.
Wow.
But I'll be finished in about 2 years now.
Oh, all right. Yeah. But yeah, I think the system. I didn't think the system would be as similar as the Indian education system. Because over here also there's no middle school. We don't call it middle
Yeah.
school or elementary school or high school. It's just the grades that you're in. So first to 12, then you go to college.
Yeah.
And then then if you would want, you can start working if you find a good opportunity, or you can do your masters and look for an opportunity after that. But for me, I wanted to become a software engineer 1st
Mhm.
before I got it. So software engineer, so college over here, like a good reputed college, was also really expensive over here.
Mhm.
So I did that for a year. It's wasted a lot of money over there because I thought maths and all of that would be easy, but maths I'm not really good at maths,
Neither am
so I
I.
had to drop out. So I had to drop out after my first year thing because for the first semester there was no maths, and everybody when I was getting into software engineering, everybody told me that maths is going to be easy and you'd be able to do it. But second semester there was no there was no calculation and all of that was happening in maths. It was a whole different ball game altogether. It was trigonometry, sine,
Ooh.
cos, theta, and all of
Yeah, no,
that.
that's too much for
Yeah,
me.
that exactly too much for me as well. I decided not to do it, at all. Then I went to this on-the-job training program. There was no there's no fees. There's no. It's not. It's free, of course. It's a sponsored program,
Yeah.
but you have to clear a set of round of interviews.
Mhm.
If you clear these 6, 7 rounds of interviews, it's kind of sponsored for you. They train you in there for 3 years.
Okay. And
You
give you a
learn
place to
skills and all
stay.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then after that, they even give you a job if you'd want.
See, that's sort of how our trade schools here work. It's you become an apprentice to like a carpenter or an electrician, and you work for them, and they give you training, and then after you complete it, they'll usually hire you if they like you well enough. The reason we call them different like schools, so like elementary, middle, and high school, is because they'll actually be like physically separate buildings that you go to. So like you go to the same school for like 6 years, then you'll change to a different school for 3 years, and then you'll go to another school for the rest of the time.
Oh, all right. Yeah.
Which is kind of
4
weird.
years the same. Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but it's over here. It's everything's together.
Yeah.
In the sense, obviously there'd be different sections of it.
Mhm.
I mean, obviously there's no name that we give over here, so there'd be a section there where students from preschool to 5th class would be studying, and there'd be 5th to 8th and all of that. There'd be a section for that.
Yeah.
And for the rest of students with 8th and above would be a different section altogether, but we don't give it a name of sorts.
Yeah.
It's more or less the same system. It's just a few details missing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, the only time in like the United States where you'll get like all of the grades really together from like 1 through 12 is in very rural areas where they don't have a lot of people. Then they'll put all the schools in one spot. But even that, they don't do much anymore. Now they just bus kids far away to schools if they live really remote.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yeah. That's an interesting system.
Or if they're really rural, sometimes they'll do homeschooling.
Oh, yeah. That doesn't happen over here that much. Homeschooling, you don't get a degree of school if you're doing homeschooling, right?
No, you absolutely can actually. You can.
Yeah?
You can.
How does that work?
So what it is let's say you want to homeschool your kids. You have to tell the state that you're in, hey, I want to homeschool my kids. And they send you a set of curriculum that the state declares you have to teach. and then you come up with your own, set of standards in classes as long as it follows that curriculum.
Right.
And then you just teach it like that. And then the state will occasionally send people in like to have to take a test. And if you pass that test, then it's like, okay, you've passed this grade to the state standards. And you can keep doing that. And then you actually make your own diploma. But the State Board of Education will sign it.
Well, that's an interesting system. That's something that's not allowed over here. I mean, you can do it when you get in college. You can do open learning and you can do distance learning programs and all of that, where they send you the curriculum and all that. But now, not in schools. You can't homeschool your kids over here.
Well, now it's even getting more popular with the internet. People will just have their kids take classes online in.
Exactly. I think over the period of time, the process of going to college, maybe schooling would still remain, because you'd need a plan and a structure that you want to send students and people through, and then you want your general public to follow that same structure. But I think the fact that I don't think there's any need of college degrees as such because of the internet. Because generally, also whatever you want to learn, you can learn from the internet. Like there are paid courses that you can take that are actually done by made and created and recorded by professional people, which are much better than regular college professors that teach you in colleges. And if you're self-motivated, I think you can learn anything that you want to from the internet.
Exactly. There's still a lot of people though that are like very scared of the internet. For 7 years, I worked in a library, like a public library. And so much of my job was just helping people use Google. They had no idea how to use Google. They were scared of using Google. So we would get phone calls a lot from people who wanted to ask a question, but they didn't know how to, use Google. We would just Google it. We didn't know the answer. And we would tell them the answer. And so many times they'd be like, thank you. I don't trust the internet. I don't trust Google. So I just wanted to phone the library. And we would always be like, oh, we understand.
Yeah.
Just don't tell them that we used Google.
That's funny. Because I feel over the internet you can actually find anything. Now, earlier, for example, if you'd wanted to learn about a subject or you'd wanted to find an answer, you'd have to go to a library. The librarian's job was really important earlier because he knew where the person would find the answers and all that. Nobody needs that anymore. You just take your phone out of your pocket and just Google search whatever you're searching for.
Well, that's what a lot of people thought about working at the library. They were like, oh, so no one goes to the library. In the United States, the libraries are more popular than they've been in 100 years.
Yeah, I can actually understand that, because I'm not saying that the libraries would become obsolete. Because as the technology is also improving, people are also realizing the importance of reading books and all that. Because Google is just a random collection of data and all of that, but the actual knowledge that you gather about the world is through reading. When you read a lot, you get to know about life and all of that.
And the role of the librarian has just changed. So now it's not what book do you want, it's what website do you need to find. I spent a lot of time teaching people just how to use the internet, that sort of thing, because I thought I wanted to be a librarian, and you need 2 special degrees to be a librarian.
Oh,
yeah.
So how is it working as a librarian? Because do you need special degrees to become a librarian in the United States?
Yes, you do. So when I worked at the library, I was what was called a library associate, which just basically meant I just worked at the library and kind of did whatever they told me to do. But to be a fully licensed librarian, you need a bachelor's degree. Doesn't really matter what in. Then you need what's called a master's of library science.
Wow, this is science to the library.
Yeah, and it's all about like preservation, information theory, distribution information theory, cataloging theory, just all these ideas of how do we best organize information and give it to make it the most accessible. And then there's a national board you have to get certification from called the ALA, which is the American Library Association. And in my state, there was another board you had to get certification from that was called CALA, which is the Kentucky Association of Librarians and Archivists.
Wow.
So you needed 2 degrees and 2 certifications to be a librarian in my state.
I have 2 questions for you.
Yes.
About the librarian. How did the job, how well the job paid? Like as a librarian in the United States, what is the amount of money that you can look at earning?
It depends. I think in my position as a library associate, I was paid $12 an hour when I left.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
For a part-time job in the United States, that's considered pretty good, especially right now, the way our economy is. And I was also given paid sick and paid vacation time, which is very rare for part-time jobs in the United States. It's really rare. Actual librarians once you go through all of that education, make between $60,000 and $80,000 a year.
Wow. That's yeah, because after you get to the level of the degrees and all of that.
Yeah.
Once you become the highest level of librarian, how much money can you look at making?
That's after you get all the degrees, is about $60,000 to $80,000, unless you become what's called a branch manager, which is a person who's in charge of a library.
Mhm.
And you'll make about 80,000, and then if you're a library director, you'll make about 120,000.
And do people aspire to become librarian over there, or is it you end up becoming a librarian because you didn't get any other opportunities?
It changes. There are a lot of people who
That's how I just did the calculation, like in
Yeah.
Indian currency, the amount of money.
Yeah.
That's like 60, 70,000. That's crazy amounts of money, man. Because in general, because you don't get it as a librarian in India.
Yeah, and that's our library, and our library paid very well. Smaller libraries don't pay that good. We just were a very well-funded library. We were very popular, and we were kind of near a big city. But so a lot of people who want to decide, hey, when I grow up, I want to be a librarian, they usually quit after working at a library for 1 or 2 years. It's usually people who are, I just need a job and the library will hire me, that end up working there for a long time because they discover they like it. Because people have an image of what it's like to work in the public library in their head, and usually very wrong. Like a lot of people think, oh, well, if I'm a librarian, I'll just read books all day and sit around. No, it's usually like at the library I worked at, it's, oh boy, I have to go clean up vomit, or I have to, there is a man who is having a mental breakdown that I have to, deal with, or there's someone with a weapon that I have to deal with, or someone's calling in a bomb threat, or people are throwing things at me and are yelling at me and insulting me. So,
yeah, but when all of that is not happening, you can by in your free time, and you get whatever free time that you get over there, you can actually read books, right? It's not like librarians can't read books.
No, you're allowed to. You just never have time. I worked the circulation department, which was the people basically like I checked the books out, I took the books back, I managed accounts, that sort of thing. So we had computers, so basically everyone was reading ebooks all the time. Just books on the computer. Then a patron would come up and you'd minimize it and talk with the patron. And sometimes the patron would insult you and throw stuff at you.
I can imagine. But I always not like I like reading a lot, so I read a lot in general. But whenever I get time, because I've often started getting a lot of time to read because the workplace that I go to is really far from where I live. So I spend about 4 hours on the road in the traffic in the bus.
Yeah.
So the entire time I usually read. I've started liking reading a lot. But looking at it right now, I can imagine myself being a librarian because I think it'd be nice to sit in probably a smaller librarian where there's not so much hustle.
Yeah, there's not so many stabbings like there were at my library.
yeah, not a lot of vomit, stabbing, guns and all of that, like weapons and all of that over there. But just sit down, relax, probably just sit in your chair, read all day.
Yeah, none of our librarians got to do that because even if you weren't working with patrons, you had to make programs because our libraries run lots of events like classes and stuff like that. So if you weren't working on one thing, you're working on another thing.
Yeah. In India, you don't have libraries that get really that busy.
Yeah.
But there are libraries, like huge libraries, that are extremely busy all the time. And I can imagine the condition of the librarians over there because it's a really difficult job because these libraries are always full.
Yeah.
And these are American libraries or British Council or British libraries that are there in this one part where all the colleges and all the college students and schools are. These libraries are really busy because of that, because people are studying, preparing for their exams and all that. So these libraries in general are busy, but the small libraries over here, you don't need a special license to become a librarian. You need enough money so that you can buy enough books and open your own library whenever you want. Or you can become a librarian just like that with experience. So you end up getting a job as a librarian. You work there for a few years, and you work your way up. And there's no special. I don't think, or probably I don't know properly. I don't think there's a special degree that's there for it.
It's actually, it is possible to become a librarian without getting a library degree, but you have to work in a library for 10 years straight. And then you petition the American Library Association and the Kentucky Association of Librarians and Archivists. You petition them and say, hey, I've worked in a library for, a lot of years. This is, what I do, what I've done. I'd like to be a librarian. And usually they say no. You have to apply a lot of times if you don't have a librarian degree. That was actually a big problem where I worked, is that we had lots of people who just called themselves librarian. Like a patron would come up and be like, yeah, I'm your librarian for the day, but they didn't have the library degrees. And so our bosses were like, you can't call yourself a librarian. That's a special title that people have to earn, and you haven't yet. So you've got to stop calling yourself a librarian.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
But it was
That's exciting. This is something new that I learned today about the library system over there. I didn't know that it paid that well.
Yeah.
And there's a
that's not
actual system.
super typical. Like I said, we're a very, very lucky library. Although there's a library in the next city over from us that pays even more because it's the biggest library on that side of the country. The Cincinnati Library, it's huge. And they get like famous actors to do commercials for them.
Wow.
Like, they had Morgan Freeman do a commercial for them, even though Morgan Freeman has no connection to the Cincinnati Library. They just paid him millions of dollars to the Cincinnati Public Library. It is a weird thing.
Wow, crazy. I always wanted to open a small library, not a library of sorts. So, just a small room for people where, I collect books. So whatever books I read. So I have a small little, not a library, I wouldn't call it a library, but a bookshelf. Like, and I have all the books that I've read. I collect all the books and kind of arrange it in that and connect it and keep it with me. So yeah, I wanted to open a small place where I could sit when I get retired. When I've worked a lot, just sit there, read all day.
Just read and have other people come and read with you.
Yes. I have library book reading sessions of sorts.
Book clubs were really popular at our library. We used to have people would be reading the same book at the same time and come and talk about it and things like that.
That doesn't happen a lot over here because of all the Netflix and all that, because I don't know a lot of people who actually read a lot. Even in my office, probably, I don't know a lot of, I don't even know a single person who actually reads a lot as a habit.
Yeah.
Because of this internet boom and Netflix and all that, nobody actually likes reading anymore that much. People who do actually, who read and realize how nice it is to read books too, because what I believe is the difference between watching Netflix and movies and the difference between reading a book is, reading itself is a different experience altogether because there's an imaginative aspect that's involved in the book. If you're reading about Joe going into a bar, you imagine Joe.
What does Joe look like to you?
Exactly. There's obviously a description that would probably come in the book, and then you imagine how he would look, and then you imagine the kind of bar that he goes to, and all of that imagination comes from the bars that you've actually visited.
Exactly.
Your understanding of the book would be really different than my understanding of the book because I imagine it completely different.
And that's why I like book clubs a lot, is just to see the comparisons and stuff. I enjoy watching movies and television and stuff, but for a different reason. Like when I'm watching a TV show, I enjoy seeing what does the director want me to see and how they craft that. And that's, I think that's really, interesting to watch. It's like, oh, why did he choose, why did he make this all blue? Why did he, use this building? But at the same time, I think with books, it's way easier to just get into the story because everything else is in your head. So it's a much more personal experience. So I like them for two different reasons. What kind of books do you usually like reading?
Usually books of autobiographies and biographies of people that I look up to. So usually that, because I get to connect to their stories because I look up to these people, and I would want to know more about these people. So I really enjoy reading about their life and how did they live and all that. And sometimes story memoirs of things that has happened to people who weren't that popular, who have described it really well and things like that. And just self-help knowledge books.
Okay.
And storybooks as well.
Yeah, I read a lot of fantasy books.
Yeah, that's something that I don't like.
Have you ever tried Lord of the Rings or anything like that?
No.
Lord of the Rings is the one to try. If you ever want to try the best fantasy novel ever, try Lord of the Rings. It's written like a history book. So it's got all the histories and events and stuff like that. It's very good.
Right, I understand. That's what people told me about the Harry Potter books as well. When I was reading that there's an entire different world that you get into. I don't know. I mean, that's
not
obviously
not the same level. Yeah.
Right, because at a certain level you get to a different world where they talk about history and all that. You understand. You get in the depth of the story basically.
Yeah.
It's a kind of genre that has never attracted me that much. Even if I'd like to read about the stories, I would like to read about small stories about life experiences. It could be fictional. It could be real. But
you like the realism aspect of it.
Yes.
See, I'm the exact opposite. I love giant, grandiose, crazy stories. I read a lot of science fiction as well.
Yeah, I like to watch these stories on TV instead of reading about it.
See, the reason I like reading them is I like the sort of the contrast of the human emotions, the little things that make people, and put them against the background of some crazy thing that could never actually happen, like some completely imaginary world, and just seeing how humanity might play out in that kind of scenario is the kind of stuff I like.
Yeah, but I generally like more realism in the stories.
Yeah, no, and there's nothing I'm not trying to knock that at all.
Yeah, no, I understand. About stories, but also one different genre that I've actually started liking a lot after reading this last book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Outliers, where it's I don't know what genre would this fall into because it's not a self-help book, but he talks about theories of life,
Mhm.
in the sense that how do successful people become successful?
Mhm.
Why some people are short-tempered, some people are not short-tempered. Why Asians are good in mathematics?
Yeah.
Why did Korean airlines have so many airplane crashes? What's the
Yeah.
theory behind it? What's the concept? Why was it happening only in Korea? Things like that, that
What's the name
actually
of the book again?
it's called The Outliers.
Outliers book. Now you got me interested. This sounds good.
Yeah, it's really nice. He talks about a lot of things in this book. He talks about the 10,000 hour rules. Have you heard about the 10,000 hours rules?
If that's where if you it takes 10,000 hours to really become like a master of a skill.
Yeah, at a world level, it takes 10,000 hours to practice something and to get the mastery of it.
Yeah.
So that's a concept that Malcolm Gladwell introduced, and although this 10,000 hours rule it's basically been refuted by a lot of scientists, and
Okay. So it's not been accepted. It's
yeah,
it's not universally accepted or anything like that.
exactly.
Okay.
It's not very. It's a interesting logic that he talks about. So one interesting this thing that he Korean Airlines, where he's in Korea there's this airline called Korean Air, and every year they were around 15 to 20% of the airlines that were actually taking off from Korea were actually they were those flights were crashing midair for
Okay.
multiple reasons, and everybody started thinking that it's basically probably a problem with the pilots, how they are flying the plane,
Yeah.
or the plane itself. There's some technical difficulty in the
Yeah.
plane. But actually, after studying it, this problem doesn't exist anymore. But this guy actually did a deep analysis on it,
Yeah.
and people who were there in the system that time also did a deep analysis on it.
Yeah.
It was actually the culture of the Korean people that was actually making all these planes to crash.
Okay.
That's
So
surprising.
it's like a psychological statistic book. Like it studies statistical outliers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of logic in support to support his this thing that he gives claims, like how culture became a huge factor that was actually making all these doing all these plane crashes were happening because of people's culture and not because there was something wrong
Yeah.
in the airplane.
Okay. See, this sounds like something my mom would have read because my mom is a sociology professor. So she has a doctorate in sociology. So she's always studying about like how cultures interact, how they come to be, what's in them. So I'll have to ask her if she's read this before or even heard of it.
Yeah, that's an interesting book that I'm reading right now.
Okay. And you're reading that one right now. That's the most recent one you've read?
I've read it. I've read it completely. I've started reading a new book called it's called A Man Called Ove. Have you heard about that?
Just because it checked out all the time at the library I worked at. It's about a man who, his wife died, right?
I don't know. I've just read like the first 2 chapters.
Hope I didn't spoil it. I'm sorry.
I don't know. Yeah. So, but as of now, there's no. I mean, he lives alone, but I haven't read to the part where the wife dies. But
My bad.
thank you for that.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yeah, don't
That's
ask
all
a library employee about books. The most recent book I've read was the last in a big fantasy series called The Core, and it's a five book series called The Demon Cycle. It's interesting because basically the author just took Christianity and he gave it a different name, and he took Islam and he gave it a different name, and then but they're exactly the same. I mean, like the same practices, the same terminology, and they all have to fight demons. And he just explored, what that would be. So I liked it a lot. And unlike a lot of fantasy series I've read, it doesn't get too gratuitous. Like, I don't know if you've ever tried reading Game of Thrones, but
no, I did try. But wasn't really enjoying the concept because watching it was, I don't know. I just didn't enjoy
and I don't either
feeling of that.
because it's just it talks about being this fantasy series, but then it's just sex and politics all the time, and that's what it focuses too much on. Whereas the reason I like the Demon Cycle is it avoids a lot of that. They're basically there's more to this world than just naked people. So let's actually follow that story.
Even I don't like sex in books. When they start talking about sex in books, it's just I bought this book by Paul Coelho called The Winner Stands Alone, and in the first it's a story about winners and all that. I didn't really read the entire book, but by half of it, every second chapter had a sex scenes that were very in detail described.
Yeah.
So I kind of started, I kind of had to stop reading the book because I don't know.
Well, because at what point is it matter to the story, and then at what point is it the author just really wants to write out sex scenes? Like we had a lot of romance novels at the library I worked at, which were basically just books full of sex, and we always had a bunch of nuns who came to the library, like Catholic nuns, and they were always getting like the really dirty romance novels. It was bizarre. Like we had to they had special names on their library cards, so like the head nun didn't find out, and it's like, all right, ladies, whatever you need to get going. Yeah.